The life of a city is similar to that of humans. It's born, it grows, and most often it encounters setbacks. And these setbacks can be self-defeating obstacles, or they can serve as points of empowerment to define and recreate the future. In this segment of Frame, we're exploring the role of commercial architecture in the rebirth of a city, how historic and contemporary viewpoints blend to honor the past while laying the foundation for the future. Joining me in this discussion is OPN Architects Principal Dave Sorg. Dave, welcome to Frame. Thanks so much for being here.
It's my pleasure.
Appreciate you hosting us for this conversation. Since we both live in Cedar Rapids, which has been a great city since its inception in 1849, we both experienced that tragic event in 2008, and now we're looking at exciting developments now and in the future. And you're very much a part of that. So I thought we'd talk about the birth, a little bit of the growth that we're aware of, and then what's happening next.
Great.
Let's talk about what we know about the history of Cedar Rapids. I know it was established in 1849.
Sure.
And architecturally, what is your knowledge about the tone of the city and its design standards?
Sure. Well, I think when the railroads came in 1859, really reinforced Cedar Rapids as being one of the transportation and industrial hubs of our community. So there was tremendous growth along probably through the late 1800s with some of the large industry.
Yes.
And then First Street Southeast along the river became the warehouse district. And then in the 1920s, we started having a lot of buildings that were going vertical with Chicago-style architecture. Was the primary architecture of the city. Okay. And then in the 1950s, we moved into this period where we had wonderful theater, fantastic downtown shopping. And unfortunately, in 1979, when Westdale Mall came, it pulled major tenants like Montgomery Ward's and JCPenney's out of our downtown. When you talk about that rebirth and starting over again, it really had a significant impact on downtown. With the floods now happening, there's this amazing reinvestment happening downtown in our community.
Now, because of the flood, we have a lot of new architecture coming into the community. Yeah. Can you tell us about the new styles and some why, and show us examples, the whole nine? So
sure.
Let's start with, what do you know? What's coming in?
It's interesting when you look at the new styles, there are several factors that allow us and force us to design differently, and some of them are building codes, sustainability, and if you've heard of LEED, which is Leadership in Energy and Environmental Design, which is a point system to show how sustainable your building is. That which usually is founded on maximizing daylighting, large amounts of glass on the south side, which is controlled, north side glass, and then you minimize east and west glazing because that's where the harshest sun comes in.
Okay.
So when you take the LEED standards along with the codes, and then what the computer has allowed us to do, when you think about hand sketching, and I used to do all of our hand sketching about 20 years ago, and when I think about the renderings I could produce, which was one fixed image versus what you can do in a few short hours, and we can show some of that here coming up, but you can do amazingly complex buildings with facets and angles and curves and solids and voids that was very difficult to really study previously. Wow. So when you take that, then we can import our three-dimensional models and send them to our structural engineer, so they can then use these models to influence their structural engineering design. So it really allows for a far more collaborative process, but you can do far more daring and cutting-edge designs.
Sure.
And then from a materiality standpoint, typically you were using stone, brick, glass, some steel. Now there are all sorts of materials like terracotta, there are composite cement panels, there are composite metal panels, and so there's far more materials to use.
Wow. One model that we have in front of us is the federal courthouse. Yep. Do you want to start with that? Because that seems to be the beginning of the rebirth.
Yeah, the federal courthouse has been on our radar for almost 20 years now. Some of the federal judges have been working on it for that long. And OPN, we were retained in 2003, and we teamed with William Rahn Associates out of Boston to do this for the federal government. So it's a 120,000 square foot facility, and it's 8 stories. It has 5 courtrooms currently, with 1 in the future. And this project it's where it's being built is where it was intended to be, but when the flood occurred in 2008, it was in design, and we had about a year left in design. And at that time, we were maybe between 7th or 10th on the list to get funding. When the flood came, it flooded our current courthouse, so we went to emergency status, which put us on the top of the list. So we would not be looking at the courthouse today if it weren't for the flood. So that put us on the top of the list.
Wow.
Then the GSA, the government, which we're working for, called and said, wait a second, we have to move the building because we can't afford to have another flood.
Right.
And that's where we just said, time out, let us study this. How can we keep it downtown where it needs to be as something that can help generate, it's the first sign of real progress after the flood when they committed to staying downtown. So we looked at ways of raising the site up 1 foot above the actual flood and then use most of the ground floor for parking and some pedestrian space, including the security sequence.
Where was the beginning place for how you all envisioned this building?
Yeah.
Were there mandates from the government on what it should entail, lead design factors?
Absolutely.
Give us some insight. What insight that you're allowed to give?
Oh, of course. There are many design guides that we had to adhere to, more than we can probably have time to talk about. And then it was contractually, we have to design it to a LEED silver, and we're happy to say that it's on track for a LEED gold. When you think about conceptually, when you have a building that's this large and it does take up 2 blocks, we really had to spend a lot of time thinking about how does it enhance downtown rather than separate what happens on this side of 8th Avenue from what happens on others. We really didn't want this to divide downtown. So the 2-block building is predicated on a large atrium, which goes through it's a 6-story atrium through the center of the building. So when you drive down First Street, you actually see through the building and beyond to the south side of downtown. The building has a gentle curve to it, so it inflects towards the river and towards the other government Beaux-Arts building. And it culminates in what we call the prow, which is a 3-story glass element that when people, whether they're jurors on jury duty or they're people visiting a trial, they can go there and hang out on some benches and really get connected with the river. And just on my last view, there are amazing, not only views of the river, but the bald eagles when they're coming in and flying around. They came very close to the glass. The most critical idea about this courthouse is the idea of transparency. When you think about a historic courthouse, they're very solid, and it doesn't really feel like you have an understanding of the building. And we really wanted to focus on the transparency of the judicial process. So we have this very transparent facade. It's almost a football field of glass on the front. So it's about 300 by 100 foot of glass, and it's blast resistant on the front of the building. And we use low iron glass to make it very transparent.
Okay.
And it shows behind the glass wall is a stone wall, which each of the 5 courtrooms plus the 1 future reside in. So as you walk up to the building, you have an immediate understanding of how you would work through the building to get to the courtrooms.
Oh, that's interesting. Now I have a better understanding of how it fits into the overall landscape.
Yep.
And I see the detailing of how it's respecting historically some of the buildings surrounding it, but yet is very contemporary and moving us to the future. Is this the beginning of new architectural style that will appear throughout downtown?
Yeah, I believe so. I mean, very clean, modern lines. They're obviously not doing anything ornate. I would say the last maybe the only postmodern building we have, which was trying to take modern interpretations of historic styles, was the Cedar Rapids Museum of Art, which was done by Charles Moore in I believe it was in the late 80s or early 90s. And so right now it's just very, again, clean, modern, simple, very much trying to express what's happening on the inside of the building throughout. So when you look at this building, there's a very clear understanding of what's happening. And when you look on the left half of the building, which is the office side, so that's where U.S. trustees, U.S. attorneys, the district clerk of court, the bankruptcy clerks, they reside on this side. So you can see the window pattern is very different on that side of the building versus on this. And then when you go around to the 8th Avenue side, you'll see smaller windows, which are for the offices, and then you'll see dramatically oversized windows, which go into the courtrooms. And this is one of the very few courtrooms, courthouses with courtrooms around the country that have natural light. And they were able to do that because the judges all decided that they would have their chambers on 1 floor, which is on the 8th floor, the top floor, as they called collegial chambers, which free up space around the courtrooms allowing them to be on the outside wall and get the natural light. And it's incredible the difference between a typical courtroom without light versus the courtrooms they have
Oh, I
here.
can only imagine. What is the hope for the revitalization of downtown when all these buildings go online?
Well, I think when you look back at the 50s and you see photos, it's really amazing when you think of all the people that were downtown, walking the streets every day, even on weekends. So there's been a nice move towards getting some downtown housing with Water Tower and Bottle Works, and hopefully we can continue to get more of that. But when you think about the ACE district, which is called the Arts, Cultural, and Entertainment District, and that's taking 3rd Street Southeast from 1st Avenue, the event center, to 4th Avenue, taking that from 4 lanes down to 2. So really the pedestrian level activity can overtake the vehicular. So it becomes a people street. And if you have the wider sidewalks, you can get outdoor seating. So Zinn's and John Bay's and other Deb's Ice Cream. Just picture this walkway with trees and landscaping, planters, hopefully special signage, and then all of this outdoor seating. It really can become an amazing space. And when you think about the hundreds of thousands of visitors coming to the event center, they need to be able to look out and say, this is where I want to go. I'm not going to get in my car and drive somewhere. I'm going to come to this street. And then once they're on 3rd Street, then they would filter into the other streets. So we're trying to just bring this back to more of a human people scale street, add bike lanes rather than these large 4-lane streets that are basically encouraging people to drive and just drive right out of our downtown.
That's really, really true. And are there cities that the community is looking to emulate to bring that area to life and bring that robust energy back?
Yeah, there are several cities that we've looked at. 16th Street in Denver, Colorado was one example. Greensburg, South Carolina is an example that we looked at, which, you know, one thing they say is it takes 10 or 20 years to really make this change. But one thing that's interesting about Cedar Rapids is when you look at next year, I think every building that I mentioned will be done and complete. So 5 short years after the flood, there will be just significant amount of revitalization occurring. So we're very excited about the future, and I think that when these buildings are complete and if we can pull off ACE District and really activate our downtown again.
That's tremendous. Will Cedar Rapids become sort of a model for the rest of the country to follow after a natural disaster? Because that's very quick turnaround, if you will.
We were thinking about, can we even have this open house for the entire community, say 5 years on the exact day of the flood? Because when to that point, if it's the 5th worst natural disaster in our country's history, and to think of what we've done in 5 short years, there are other examples that we've used and said, hey, if we can just be done in 10 years like this community, and to do it in half that amount of time is really amazing. And then when you think about the amphitheater across the river, and then Nubo City Market, and all of these other things with what's happened in the medical district, there really is a tremendous amount that we should be proud of in our community. And this was done through federal, state, and private dollars. So everyone pitched in to help make this happen.
Dave, thank you so much for hosting us and taking us on this journey and educating us on what's happening next. It's very exciting and uplifting to see how the setback from 2008 did not define our city, and actually I think it propelled us into the future a little faster.
Oh, absolutely. In fact, I think a year and a half from now, a year and 3 months from now, I'll be happy to take you around the various projects in our community, because both on a professional and personal level, I'm just thrilled to see what we've been able to do both on a private and public level, and working together to see this reinvestment and this rebirth happening.
To just recap and plant the seeds for what's happening in the next year to year and change, we'll see the federal courthouse live online.
Yeah, that will be this summer and opening in probably the fall. November will be the first court session. The event center.
Yes, and that whole event center, convention, hotel, and then a childhood favorite of mine, the Paramount.
Absolutely.
Is next year.
That's actually this fall.
This fall. Yes. All right. And what else? We have the library, of course.
And that'll be spring, summer of 2013.
And then the Economic Alliance will go into the old Science Center.
That's correct. There's also the amphitheater, the Nubo City Market, what's happening with the Mercy Cancer Center and the new PCI
Yes.
building, so the medical mall is starting to take place.
Everything is shaping up beautifully.
Yes.
Thank you so much for your contributions, and
You're
thank you
welcome.
for helping us understand how a city can definitely rebuild and move on to the next cycle of life.
Absolutely, it's my pleasure.
Thanks so much.
You're welcome.
And thank you for tuning in. In this segment of Frame, I continue our visual tour of exquisite residential architecture in the corridor. This time we're in Cedar Rapids, but joining me again is Realtor and EcoBroker Linda Thrasher. Linda, thank you for joining me on Frame.
Thank you for having me once again. I really enjoy this.
Absolutely. We had so much fun in Iowa City. I thought we'd continue our conversation and visual journey in Cedar Rapids and one of my favorite areas, and that's the southeast side of town.
I would have to agree. This area of town is just beautiful. You've got homes with all kinds of character. You're not going to find a typical cookie cutter home at all in the southeast side. Mature trees, parks, this is really the heart of the city, I feel.
Lots of charm, lots of style, which we're all about. So let's take a little walkabout, shall we? And join us for this really exquisite visual tour. This one to our left is really fascinating because I call it the hybrid house, but
It is.
Tell
I
us
would
about
actually
it.
agree with you that this is definitely a hybrid house. The fascia has so many different views. You've got more of the traditional English over there with the bay window and the copper roof, and then you've got a Juliet balcony there that could also come off as plantation style, especially with the fan up there. And then over here you've definitely got the Frank Lloyd Wright craftsman feel of architecture above the garage. So it's quite an interesting house, but you know, it all works very well together.
It really does, and they tied everything together with that black wrought iron.
Yes.
It's an ornate detailing from the outside lights, the exterior lights all the way around, and then the balcony, and the front fencing area
all
too.
the way down to with the railing as well. So you your eye just follows that, and you don't miss anything, and it doesn't look choppy at all. It's just a really beautiful example of combining different styles and making it work. This home behind us is a wonderful, clean, well-manicured example of the Tudor style. And again, you've got the pitch of the roof line, you've got the nice little doorway, and the detailing on the stucco area, which is reminiscent of old school Tudor homes in Europe. And the windows, again, are set correctly, and it's just a really clean, beautiful hot pocket.
I love the little porch up front, and I love how they incorporated the limestone. It's just really well done. And
Yes.
it's interesting that you call them the hashtags, is it?
Yeah.
Are not as high contrast of a color as we've seen before. I
No.
really like the subtleness of how they
Yes,
incorporated
I think
the
they
Tudor
really wanted to
detailing.
bring out more of the detailing in the limestone and they did a really good job of that, and it just flows well with the rest of the color of the home. It's not,
I agree.
it doesn't take away from it at all.
No. Let's round out our conversation of styles with this beautiful mid-century
Mid-century
modern.
Yes, clean lines throughout. 1950s is about the mid-century modern home. That's when they came out, or the atomic ranch as people called it. Sturdy, well-built homes with lots of light and just great use of lines, and no space was left unused. You've got the brick, you've got the woodwork fascia, so you're encompassing several parts of nature into the home, and just the really clear, clean lines that you would also see in a craftsman style home.
I love how they incorporated nature all around.
Yes.
It seems very indigenous to the environment.
It really does, and it works with its space instead of against it, and that's what I really like about that.
Yes. We've climbed a hill to show you this architectural treat. It is actually a very contemporary design, but it's a special design, which is
Called Bauhaus. This style of home is from the 18th century actually, and it rebelled against the Victorian style of home. It's a smaller footprint, and the actual fascia and the exterior of the home is reminiscent of a cruise ship.
like the Love Boat. No, I'm just kidding.
Like the Love Boat, but more the classic old, like the Queen Mary, you know, the real large, great Titanic style cruise ships.
With very simple lines, very clean, and there's this silo feature.
Which would be the pipes of the engine of the cruise line.
And it's beautifully decorated with the aluminum siding, including these water spout drains. And the ornamental grass is a great accent for it because you don't want to distract from the lines, and that really gives it an accent as well as keeps in step and taste with our prairie lands.
Yes, and the movement in the grass really just draws your eye towards the architecture of the home as well.
Fun piece. Architecture paints the personality of neighborhoods, cities, and countries. It also serves as a reflection of lifestyles, society, and designer perspectives. In this segment of Frame, we go on an adventure and explore the architectural styles in the historic Manville Heights neighborhood in Iowa City. Joining me is Realtor and EcoBroker, Linda Thrasher. Linda, welcome to Frame.
Thank you for having me.
Oh, it's a pleasure, and thanks for going on this excursion with me.
No problem, I'm excited.
I know you are. You both love architecture. Obviously, she's in the real estate business, and I know you've seen a plethora of homes.
Yes.
What makes this neighborhood so special?
Manville Heights is special in that it has a beautiful range of all styles of housing, from craftsman to contemporary to mid-century and everything in between, and it's a lovely marriage of all of those styles of architecture. So it's a great palette to walk around and introduce people to different styles of housing.
Well, wonderful. You directed me to a website where we've pulled down some information about the different styles, which is why we have our clipboards, and we'll share these interesting homes with you as we go through a walking tour.
Yes.
All right, you ready? Let's do it.
All right.
Linda, this house combines a couple different architectural styles according to the research.
Yes.
Fill us in, please.
Here you've got the neoclassical and the Italian Renaissance. So if you look at the lower windows, you'll see the archway or the porticos that people like to use in Italy. And then at the top, you've got more of the classical, traditional, almost farmhouse style look, which you'll find more in English architecture. And it's just a nice blend, and the brick marries both of those together well, because that style brick is found both in Italy and in England.
This is really beautiful. I love the combination. The color palette is very, very classy.
Yes.
In addition to the classical lines of it. Now, I find it interesting that this particular house is symbolic of the medium to large scale homes being built during the Depression.
The Depression era, you're dealing with the economizing of homes. You'll notice that other homes will be in a smaller lot size, and we will see some of those like the Tudor and the Cape Cod. Large scale is still happening, you know, the roaring 20s and 30s, you're just starting, and so Manville Heights, this one was around, built in 1936, so you've got the peak of the large scale as it's just starting to hit the Depression and the downturn, and they did a good job of making it smaller scale on the large scale front.
Linda, I can't think of anything more American than a house with a white picket fence.
Yes.
How charming is this?
It's very charming, and again, America's adaptation of the Cape Cod colonial revival. So this has got a combination of two. If you look at the columns at the front of the house, it looks more like a colonial, almost plantation style home detailing, but then you've got the smaller scale with the shake siding that's been painted yellow. Usually it's left as cedar shake, and so it ages and patinas with wetness and rain, and it's a dull gray look that you see like Martha's Vineyard and on the East Coast.
Yes.
But they took liberty to add a little color and design, which is cute, so it kind of looks like a bungalow. Just a lovely little house, small footprint. You're looking at about 800 square feet. If we left it typical to the era and the design, we wouldn't have this kind of roofing system, but it still works nicely, and the picket fence just makes it Americana. Here we are at Alpha Sigma Phi, and this is a great example of Italian Renaissance style and architecture. And you can see it in the examples of the relief in the portico at the top of the doorways there with, I think we've got a lion's face, and the ironwork, and the Juliet balconies, and
Those are beautiful.
and then the brick and how it's inlaid. And then you've got the clad tile, ceramic tile there on top, and that's where we are. So you would probably see this in an Italian villa, you know, overlooking the Mediterranean. But we're overlooking the Iowa River, which is just as good.
It's almost exactly the same, Linda. Almost exactly.
Yes, almost exactly.
Now, the red doors, would those be something that would be original to this period, or did somebody take creative liberties with having such a strong signature?
In that tone of red, probably not. You're going to have more of like a milk paint texture, which is a lighter red, but it works well to really pop the color of the brick.
From the Italian countryside to
the
prairie land.
Yes. Here we are at a beautiful example of a craftsman prairie style home. Now, craftsman design and mission design really got popular with Frank Lloyd Wright. He's one of the fathers of craftsman design and prairie style design in the US. So with prairie and craftsman design, you really want to fit into your environment. You want the home to blend with its surroundings and to not be like an obstruction to that. And that's the perfect example that we have here with this home. And a classic look for craftsman style homes are the horizontal windows.
Yes.
Okay. And then you've got also the cedar shake, once again. And the way the roof is pitched, you've got a certain line where it starts, angled, but then it pops out a little bit to, you see that a little bit to push out the water. And lots of light. There's a need for natural light, which is why you've got the windows situated the way they are on the east and the south end of the homes. And here you've got great detailing with the columns being strong and prominent in the portico and the hanging light fixture, which is reminiscent of that era.
This home is stunning. What a way to end our tour.
Yes.
Please tell us about this house. I feel like I am on a southern plantation in the middle of the Midwest.
Yes, this home has several blends. You've got the classical revival with the little French Renaissance and colonial. So really the colonial look here in the US, you were taking the French Renaissance look with the columns and the pillars and the Juliet balcony there in the front and just the round feminine looks. And so here we have a perfect example of the marriage of the classical revival, the French Renaissance and the colonial look, and that's where I think you get that plantation feel. You're just thinking like it should be somewhere in Georgia or
Louisiana.
Where's
Rhett?
Yes.
Rhett? How you darling?
Mint juleps and
sugar,
bocce ball in the yard. Just that whole summer in the Hamptons environment.
Yes, which would be lovely right now.
Yeah.
Any parting words, Linda?
Well, I would like to say Manville Heights is definitely a great neighborhood to learn about different architectural design and just a history of Iowa City as well. McGowan is a nice little street here, and we call it Writer's Row. Several Pulitzer Prize winners lived on McGowan, and it's a cute little street with a mix of Tudor, more traditional style homes. So if you get a chance, just come out and search it out, and even in your neighborhood, get to know the history of a home, and I think it really helps you get more connected with your surroundings and your space and your neighborhood.
I would agree, and I will say after living in different parts of the country, it's so refreshing to have such distinctive neighborhoods. You don't live in one, it's one not too far away from you, where the homes are all different and it's not a cookie cutter environment.
No.
So there's something to really cherish about where we live. So take advantage of it, respect it, appreciate it, and enjoy every part of the journey.
Yes, I would agree.
Thank you for going on the adventure.
Thank you
You're
for
a
having
blast.
me. It was
Let's
great.
do something else again. You got it.
Most definitely.
And thank you for tuning into this segment of Frame.
sponsored by Allegra, Click Marketing Solutions, OPN Architects, Dial Folio Jewelry.